BAMTV, and in this episode we are going to be starting a series on IT, and we're going to start with the number one pain point that most BAS professionals face, and that is networking. So what is networking? Networking is how computers, how devices that utilize a computer network communicate with one another. Now, you may not know this, but if you've installed, sold, designed, or in any way supported a building automation system, you have worked with networks. You may not have called them networks, but they were networks. So how we're going to go through the next several episodes are we're going to follow this thing called the OSI model. And the OSI model essentially is a 7-layer model, and we're going to focus on the first 4 layers. Okay, we're going to focus on the physical layer. That is going to be all of our wiring. We're going to focus on the data link layer. We're going to focus on the IP. I wrote network. On the IP layer. And we're going to focus on the transport layer. Okay? So physical, data link, IP. Actually, it's network or IP. I don't remember off the top of my head. And the transport layer. So these are going to be the first 4 layers of this model. And basically this model is a way of showing how devices communicate. And the reason you need to know this, whether you're in sales, whether you're a technician, whether you're service and operator, is because understanding these 4 layers is going to help you to, 1, communicate with IT. Most of the issues you're going to resolve in your BAS career are going to be resolved not through you, but through someone else. The reality is IT folks are not going to let you log into their switches and configure their networks. They're not going to go and let you stand up databases and servers in their data center. They're going to do all these things for you, and your goal as a BAS professional is to have the knowledge of both the terminology and the application. You don't necessarily need to know how to do things. You just need to know how things are done. That's a big shift with virtually the same words. Knowing how to do something means that you can step by step go through doing it. Knowing how something is done means you understand the steps. You may not know exactly how to do it, but you understand the steps. That way, when you're sitting in the meeting with IT, you can have that conversation and that credibility, because you're speaking the same language and you're aware of which steps need to be followed. That alone will massively reduce the amount of time you're waiting for IT requests to get approved. That will really increase your effectiveness with IT, and it'll increase your credibility with IT, which will become a competitive advantage that others in the BAS industry do not have because they have not invested in learning IT. So that's why it's so important for you to follow through this information. Now we're going to approach this from the perspective of a BAS professional, just like we do in our course IT for BAS professionals. That is the big difference between all the other network teaching that's out there on the internet, because there's a ton of network, server, database, remote access teaching out on the internet, but it doesn't come at it from a BAS perspective, and because of that, it's not really applicable to the BAS day-to-day jobs. All right, so what is the physical layer? Well, the physical layer, first off, let's talk about a network, right? So your basic network consists of really 4 things. So you have a host, and a host is a supervisory device with an IP connection, an IP field controller. That's what a host is, okay? And this host has a network interface card, or a NIC, and that NIC is a port. It has a port coming out of it, okay? And that port has a link. So this is called a link. So we're doing terminology 101 right now. And this link, there's either 2 types of links, right? So between networking devices, this is a switch, and this is a router. I'm just going to say RTR. We're not going to focus on this in this lesson. This is going to be kind of in episode 10, most likely. We'll cover that. And the switch we'll cover in episode 9. We're going to be focused in on the physical layer here. But you have this link, and this link connects the host to the switch. and they connect via physical ports. Okay, these ports are where we plug our wires into. Most common wires we use are called Ethernet wires. Now, Ethernet is both a type of wire, but it is also a data link protocol, which we'll cover in the next episode. And data link protocols are how we communicate data between or across the link. That's the easiest way to understand it. So whereas IP and TCP/UDP, which are both kind of higher layers of this model, while these talk about, so IP talks about networking outside of the local subnet, which we'll cover subnets in the next episode. And TCP/UDP is going to cover networking, but it's also going to cover connection-oriented and connectionless-oriented communication, which if you're like, and I want to take a brief segue here, you're probably feeling a little bit overwhelmed by all the terminology I'm throwing at you, because I've pulled down the barrier and I'm throwing a lot of IT terms at you. And the reason why is we're going for like this total immersion concept here. What we want to do is we want to immerse ourselves in this terminology that is rather uncomfortable for us if we don't have a formal education in IT. You know, I have a master's degree, I have 2 master's degree in IT, several certifications. I've designed networks for hospitals. I've managed the integration program for a Fortune 100 company. I've got a lot of IT background. But it wasn't always the case. Didn't always have that IT background. And it was immersing myself in that environment that got me to where I am today. And that's what we're going to be doing in these episodes. So if it feels uncomfortable, if it feels unfamiliar, realize that that's good. That's a good feeling. Your temptation is going to be to stop the video, stop listening, and just tune out. Don't do that. Rather, embrace that discomfort. Embrace that feeling of unknown, because this is a safe place to embrace it. You don't want to be embracing that unknown when you're sitting across the table from IT. That is the wrong time to be embracing new terminology. This is the safe time. So embrace this. We're going to go through it and take your time. Fortunately, this is on YouTube, so you can just watch it again and again and again and again. All right. So as I said, we have ports, right? And these ports connect the host to the switch, okay? This is a physical connection. So the first thing, troubleshooting-wise, that we want to check when we are... Oh, I just stepped on a switch there. I've got a lot of networking stuff over here. All right. So if the first thing, as we go through troubleshooting, this is another reason this model and understanding of this model is so important, because as we go through troubleshooting, this is going to be how we check things. You know, is it physically working? Do we have the data link? Do we have IP addressing? Is routing working? Things like that. Transport, are our ports open? Things like that. Because really what we're going to be focused on, like here, port, IP address, MAC address, cabling. Okay? And this will be kind of our troubleshooting process, because the reality is that we're going to still have, while we won't be setting up our stuff, we oftentimes have to troubleshoot our stuff in the BAS world. Okay, so you've got your host, your network interface card. Your network interface card physically allows that host to connect to the network. So a host, once again, could be a BAS supervisory device. It could be a BAS IP controller. It could be a variety of different devices, right? So this network interface card has a link. There's 2 kinds of links, as I mentioned. This is a access link. Once again, important terminology. You know, you may be going and talking to IT, and you may say, hey, I need a connection for my supervisory device. That's a lot different than saying, hey, I need an access link to your switch. You say it that way, that instantly has more credibility than just saying, hey, I need a place to plug my Ethernet cable into. Do you see the difference? Okay, sure, yeah, I'm going to give you just some random cable. I'm going to let you plug it in wherever. Versus access link, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. And I hate to say it this way. No one wants to admit it, but a lot of this is going to be fake it till you make it at first, because this is going to be experiential learning. You're going to have the foundational knowledge down. You'll be able to understand the dialogue and the communication, but you've got to get out there and apply what you're learning here and experience it again and again to get comfortable with using this terminology. So you've got access link, and then you've got trunk link. And these trunks essentially connect parts of the network. So a switch is a local device, and what it does is back in the day, actually let me show you a switch. Okay, so I've got a 48 port Cisco switch right here. You can kind of see all the ports. So we got a Cisco switch. It's an older one, but hey, it works nonetheless. Able to pick it up off eBay for pretty cheap. So that switch right there is called a managed switch, meaning it has an operating system in there, and I can manage the ports. I can manage what is called the management plane or control plane of the switch. So I can just manage all the ports, remember our ports, coming out, and the host devices that are connected to that. Okay? Now, here's the deal. The switch is a software application inside of a physical device that switches network connections. In the past, you used to call into the phone company and they would switch you. They would do what's called circuit switching, okay? They would actually unplug one circuit and plug it into the next, and that's how they created connections. Well, a switch does it dynamically called packet switching. Inside the switch, as we'll learn in the next episode, there's things called address resolution protocol, ARP, and ARP tables that allows you to do these connections. Well, here at these connections, we have bits. Okay, and these bits are the measurement of data flow. And a bit is a 1 or a 0. So if we were to look at a digital signal here, it would look like this, where this is 0 and this is 1. And this is how communication happens across a wire. And what happens is that this wire right here, okay, coming off of here, this wire has a bunch of conductors in it. I'm not the best artist in the world, but these conductors are individual wires. Typically, Ethernet has 8 wires in 4 pairs of 2 that are wound up together. Well, going across this wire, you have bandwidth. And bandwidth is the capacity of the wire to transfer bits across it. Okay, so your host, through its network interface card connected to the switch, is going to be transferring bits, going to be transferring data across this wire. Now, what happens is typically you won't run into bandwidth constraints at the access link. You will typically run into bandwidth constraints at the trunk link if you run into them at all. It's not that common if you are on a dedicated network. That's one of the big things about OT networks, these operational technology networks, which are basically segmented networks. Well, I'm not fully on board with those yet because I don't believe anyone has an effective model right now about how to support OT networks. There hasn't been an effective model put in place. I definitely have ideas as to how that could be done, but at the same time, no one has kind of ratified an OT model for essentially a BAS contractor managing a network. There's still a lot of finger pointing when it comes to who owns the network, those kind of things. That being said, bandwidth at the trunk, this is where occasionally you can have maybe a 4K camera. So a camera here attached. Like I said, I'm not the world's best artist. A camera attached to the switch, and this camera is feeding bit right up here, and the bits going up are more than the pipe can handle, and so your BAS data starts to drop off. That's not as common, but it's something you need to be aware of, okay? So we covered a lot in this little episode, and it's always a challenge for me having the kind of background I do to know, hey, what exactly should I expose you to initially? That's the challenge of an instructor, right? That's why we put a lot of time into our IT for BAS course, because we really wanted to make sure everything was covered that the BAS professionals needed to know, but at the same time, we didn't overwhelm with more than was actually needed to know. So when you're looking at this, what I want you to see as a BAS professional talking to you, another BAS professional, is, all right, I've got my BAS device and it's got a network interface card on it. And I plug my cable into it, and I've got to make sure that my electrician terminated those cables right and that they followed the right wiring standard as to where the wires go when they terminated those cables. Then I want to make sure that they're connected to the right networking device and that that port is open. We'll talk more about that in the next episode. We'll talk about open ports. We'll talk about address resolution protocol. We'll talk about MAC addressing, those kind of things. But these are all things I want you to be aware of just from a physical perspective, that we have bits, that we have bandwidth, that we communicate through physical ports, which a lot of people mix up application and physical ports. So we've got that. And our ports are connected to what are called an access link. And the switch that we connect to is connected to a router, typically through what's called a trunk link. I know, it was a lot to take in, and this is just the beginning. Over the next couple episodes, we're going to go through each one of these each one of these layers right here, physical, data link, IP transport. Now, this was just a taste. I really, really encourage you, if you are planning on being in the BAS world for the next 10, 15, 20 years, you really need to check out our IT for BAS Professionals course. It's not essentially, I was going to say it essentially is, but it's not even essentially. It is a complete boot camp for BAS professionals on IT. You take this one course and you will know everything you need to know about IT for your career to be successful. Really encourage you to check that out. I'll put a link in the comments below the video. That being said, thanks so much for watching. As always, post your questions below the video in the chat. Would love to answer those questions for you. And we'll see you in next week's episode where we will start to talk through the data link. All right, thanks.